Endless Hustle presented by Cardon. If you're like me and you're noticing dark circles under your eyes, wrinkles creeping up, or breakouts, then Cardon is the best solution for you. Cardon is an effective skincare system for men. Cardon uses cactus extract in all their products to soothe the irritation from shaving. This quick, easy to use skincare system gives you real results in just a few steps. Use code BroBible for 15% off. All right, we've got a great day on the Endless Hustle as I've got one of the best investing minds, the prophet himself, joining me on the show today, the one and only Marcus Lemonis. Marcus, enormous fan, because I remember the first time I saw the prophet and I was like, this dude's awesome, just absolutely awesome. And here you are now 8 years later, and you've become this incredible TV personality, one of the most respected investors on the planet. And now you're chatting with me. What happened, Marcus?
You know, I remember, first of all, good morning or good afternoon or whatever the hell time it is. I remember the first time I saw the show and I was like, what in the hell am I doing? What is this idea? And this notion that you could really put real money into these businesses and get something out of them, I thought I was out of my mind. I realized today that 50% of the time I was right. I was out of my mind. And it's been an interesting journey for sure.
All right. So I want to turn back the clock, take you all the way back. You're a serial entrepreneur. You've made gajillions of dollars, but where did it begin for you? At what moment did you realize I'm going to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I don't think there's ever a moment. I have to be honest with you. I hear that question asked of people in business a lot. I don't think there's ever a moment. I think there's an evolution. And I really believe that people's appetite to like business is part of their DNA, just like they like sports or they like fashion or they like whatever they like. And it comes down to really aptitude and resources. And I think that's a really interesting challenge is that, you know, as a young kid, I always liked this idea of being in business. I didn't know why at the time. I think in hindsight, it's because I thought it was a way for me to level the playing field with kids that I thought I wasn't able to keep up with. As I got older and noticed that my awkwardness was really more present than I thought, business became really a great way for me to leverage relationships and find the one thing that would give people an interest in having a connection with me. And if we think about it as kids, we would love to be friends with the rock star. We'd love to be friends with, professional athlete. And nobody ever wanted to be friends with a business person. It wasn't in vogue 20, 30 years ago. It was like our mom and our dad worked, they made money. We didn't really know what they did. We had a little side hustle in our neighborhood where we sold stickers to kids for some money, but we never really thought about it that way. And I think what's kind of fascinating is you think about it today, and kids, because of the internet, because of technology, are being exposed to things that none of us thought. Like we were selling lizards in a magnifying glass as a kid that you can make some money on, where you can blow the lizard up. Today, kids are selling, their coding services at 11 years old to people like you and me to try to figure out how to run our life. And so I don't know if there was any specific moment. There are days, even as recently as yesterday, where I still scratch my head and wonder if I did the right thing. Because being a business person isn't as glamorous as people think it is. It's not as easy. And every time I complain about it to my wife, she sort of chuckles and says, you sound stupid. You sound like Gwyneth Paltrow saying it's hard to be an actress. You chose this lifestyle. And so I don't know what to tell you other than you chose it and you just deal with it. But it's been fun.
You start in the car business. For those who don't know, you were actually adopted. And I think that's really fascinating because another person who was adopted, who obviously experienced incredible success, was Steve Jobs. And how did that shape you? How did your childhood, how you grew up, how did it mentally shape you in terms of creating the drive that you now have?
It's a great question. I don't think it did anything to my childhood other than the fact that when you're adopted, you really never feel, no matter what anybody tells you, you never really feel like it's permanent. You feel like there's risk associated with it because you're almost on borrowed time and you're borrowed goods. And I think part of what happens is this idea to be self-sufficient and independent and self-providing kicks in. almost in this survival mode. And part of what motivated me was this fear that I didn't know if what was happening was permanent or temporary. And while that's totally irrational, because clearly parents don't give kids back. Well, not always, but parents don't give kids back. You do have this idea that you have to figure out how to be self-sufficient and be able to take care of yourself. And business is the way to do that, for sure. For me, it was.
You grow up in the car business, and I know a lot about the car business because one of my longtime friends is a very successful car dealer, has over 30 dealerships now. So I've gotten to
You don't know any poor car dealers, do you? Do you know any poor car dealers?
They all do well. You don't
know any poor car dealers.
Recession proof. It is recession proof. Especially by the way, if you have the right brands. If you have the right brands, it's really recession proof. But you grow up in the car business. Lee Iacocca is one of your mentors, and you're holding all these different jobs. At that point, are you already building a vision for what you're going to become? Are you starting to assess, hey, I could be a successful dude?
No, I'll tell you, even today, I feel like I'm always a little haphazard, and that's not something that I'm proud to admit. I do feel like sometimes I'm all over the place. And when people say they know exactly where they're going or they know exactly where they want to go, I agree with the second statement. I don't think people really know exactly where they're going because there's forces outside of them, including demons in their own head and fears that they have and anxieties that they have. But there's also other people that are in your ear and they're telling you what you should be and shouldn't be doing. And I almost feel like being in business is like being a nomad. It almost feels safer to be a school teacher because you get up every day and you know exactly what your responsibility is. You know exactly how you're serving society. And at the end of the day, you know exactly what you're going to do tomorrow. And I think in our world, we don't know what the balance of the day is going to be. We don't know what next week's going to be. And while that sounds glamorous and fun, it's actually kind of scary because you never know when things are going to change. And it's interesting to me. I'm transitioning to a new show at HGTV. And I had this very weird feeling come over me because I'm at the point in my Camping World career, I'm trying to figure out like, what's the next 5 years or 10 years look like? Has time passed? Do I want to go do something different? And I remember reading a book about professional athletes who enter into their retirement zone and they go through terrible depression and they have all this fear because they're not going to go out in the field and people aren't going to cheer for them anymore. And the problem, I think, the risk in being an entrepreneur is that we're all motivated by the applause that we get from our employees or our investors or our bankers or our customers. And in the absence of that, we have this fear of like, where is the recognition of being an entrepreneur? Who's going to tell me that my idea is good or bad? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to cheer for me? Who's going to invest in it? And the absence or the risk of those things creates a terrible, for me it does, it's paralyzing. Because I built my whole career on having some level of success and whether we want to admit it or not, our egos get stroked by that success. And when there's a fear that stroking is going to go away, it sends us into a little bit of a tailspin. And so while it's unbelievable and super blessed to have financial success, the financial success can never really, for me, make up for any void that would exist from a human capital void, I don't want to call it fear of failure because I'm sick of hearing that word. It's fear of isolation. And that's a very hard thing for an entrepreneur because an idea is only as good as somebody's willing to buy or take it on today. It can go away tomorrow. So I worry about that a lot for entrepreneurs.
So you'd obviously mentioned Camping World, and Lee Iacocca comes to you and he's like, I see a deficiency here in the RV world. You had never really done anything with RVs. So how does that all begin for you? Are you like, what are you talking about? I'm not ready for this.
The interesting thing for me is that the RV industry is really no different than the car business, right? It's a similar process from a business standpoint where you're buying a piece of metal and you're selling a piece of metal, and it has all these touch points in between, and the touch points are pretty similar. As a kid growing up in Miami, going into South Beach and Coconut Grove and all these cool places, I didn't see a lot of RVs. I had a neighbor that had one. And my mom and I used to joke that they were like, maybe they were from Alabama or maybe they were from Mississippi. They happened to be from Alabama, ironically enough. And back then I had a really shitty attitude about it. I would think to myself, like, is this like a hillbilly or a redneck activity? And when you're on South Beach, you don't see a lot of it. As I got older and started to realize that the RV business was a very fragmented segment, it became really a blank canvas for me. And the car business is, as you know from your friends, very competitive, very difficult, and very lucrative. The RV business is not that competitive, not that difficult, and very lucrative. But its lucrativeness is not built on the demand from the marketplace. The lucrativeness is based on the lack of sophistication that exists in the marketplace. And I was at this really weird, fork in the road where I had to decide that if I was going to take this risk and leave the auto business and get into the RV business, I would have to go all in. And it's been, I think it's now 21 or 22 years that I've been in the RV business. And part of my motivation was everybody thinking that it was the weirdest thing for Marcus to get into. And I think that was part of why I did it. You'll find with me, and I want other people to feel the same ways, go into things that people don't expect you to go into, go into things that you don't think you're capable of, go into things that people would never predict you're going to go into them. Because it's not only a challenge for you to figure out how to convince people about it, but it's also a challenge for you to convince yourself. And it was a huge pivot for me. And I'm not a big RVer. I don't live the lifestyle like I should. I'm embarrassed to admit that publicly. It's just not something that I spend a lot of time doing. I've been RVing. I have a passion for the families that do it, but it's a fun business, and it's a business that, quite frankly, is going nowhere but up. Nowhere but up.
So how does the profit happen? I've had so many entrepreneurs turn TV personalities on the show lately, everybody from John Taffer to Tarek El Moussa, and to hear how these guys and girls who had success in their industry found their way into television is fascinating to me. How did it happen for you?
Well, I'll say this. First of all, a business person on television is only a business person on television if they spend money. And so that's my single dig of the day. There's a lot of people that make business television, but they don't spend any money. They don't write a check out of their own pocket. And that's always been a big problem for me. And when 2008 came around and the world was collapsing for all of us, and I think we could all think back, there's a couple of moments in time where we know where we were. 9/11 is one of them. Watching Whitney Houston at the Super Bowl right after the war was one of them. Thinking about when the stock market was falling thousands of points in 2009 was one of them. We all can remember where we were and what it felt like, spinning out of control. I think ultimately, for me, it was how do I change the way people think about businesses? And at the time, I never really watched CNBC or business television much, but what I do remember is that it was all about Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies. How much is their stock going down? How are they going out of business? And what we didn't hear about was what was happening on Main Street. What was happening to the small shop owners that employ 85% of the workforce. And as I came out of that recession, whatever we want to call that, depression, 2009, 2010, 2011, it really did stick with me that nobody created this platform for these small business owners to have their own soapbox, to have their own platform to talk about their plight, their challenges, their lack of resources. And so I got approached by a gentleman by the name of Charlie Ebersol. He was Dick Ebersol's son. And Dick Ebersol was the big sports guy at NBC for years. I mean, brought us the Olympics and Super Bowls and all sorts of stuff. And he said to me, look, we'd like to do a show with you about investing. And we want to do a sizzle. And I didn't know how any of this worked. And I remember doing this small sizzle, and we went down to a local business in Orange County, California, and it felt very contrived, and it felt very scripted, and it felt very overly produced. And it was, get mad, yell, throw something, do this and that. And I remember saying to these guys, like, this is not how it works. This is not how business works. If we're going to make a show, we have to truly make it as real as we possibly can. And the reality of reality television is that you take 8 hours of programming, you edit it down to 42 minutes. It's a simplify and exaggerate model. And but it was important to me that the beginning, the middle, and the end had the bones of of truth. And we were all coming off the heels of Extreme Home Makeover, where the bus always moved and everybody always got a great home and people cried. And then you'd read 6 years later, their house got foreclosed because they couldn't pay the taxes. And so I really wanted to create a show that profiled individual businesses for a specific reason. And I've told people this recently, but it was never about the individual specific business as much as it was about teaching the lesson. What was the lesson that you wanted the kids to take away, other business owners like yourself, myself, to take away? And how many years could it last? And how do you prove to people that it's real? And the only way you prove to people that it's real is it can't all be the same. It can't all end the same. The investments can't be the same. And so you got to be really careful. And as we sit here today, we've done 100 and call it 15 episodes. I am $85 million in over those 115 episodes. People ask me all the time, are you ahead or behind in your investment? I am behind by a lot. But I made the decision about 4 years ago that was okay, because I really always knew that I wanted to be a teacher of some kind. And I've decided that I would use this show as a giant social experiment. And this idea that we always think about, that if you give people an opportunity, what will they do with it? And ultimately, that opportunity should be based on giving them some resources and expecting to give them some sort of blueprint, and then they have to do the work. And of the 114, I do have a camp of have and have nots. I have appreciated what's been done for me, and I have put in the work, and I have made sacrifices, and I have done the things that I've been asked to do. And in most cases, it works out for me. And the have-nots are the people that have not done the work, have not put in the effort, have not operated with integrity, but still want to keep their hand out. And so at some point, I'll uncover and reveal those people, not specifically in name or in business, but those people who are part of the have and part of the have-nots, and what I learned from it. We always knew that if you take people that have fight and vigor and something to prove, but have not been given the opportunity, have not been given the education, have not been given the financial resources, what will they do with it? I am really disappointed to tell you, and I'm sure I will get in trouble for saying this for many moons to come, that what I found over the years is that there was a big difference between how men and women handled it, a huge difference. Women took the opportunity very seriously. They put in more effort than I ever would have expected. Men had a level of entitlement and arrogance and ego. And I know I said entitlement once, I want to say it again. And it really did point out for me where my efforts should be pointed in the next 10 to 20 years. That if we think about opportunity in the marketplace, we know that men, white men particularly, have been given different opportunities than people of color or women. And I love to say things like that because it gets the blood boiling in people, particularly white men. They get upset. They say, that's not true. And for me, I will do some sort of dossier documenting every single investment and every single reaction, and the gender and their background and their educational background and their financial background and the opportunity that they had or didn't have, and what they did with this opportunity. And for me, that's been the most fascinating thing, because while you may have learned and others may have learned, I learned more about myself, more about humanity, and I feel like I'm better prepared for the next 2 decades than I ever was before. It's been kind of shocking, to be honest.
Here's what I love about you. I love your authenticity. The stuff that you just said is so, whether someone agrees with it or disagrees with it, it's so authentic to the way you think. And I want to actually transition to your podcast, because you have a new podcast, and congratulations. And I was listening to several episodes over the holiday, and this is the authenticity that comes through in the podcast, because you're a very, very wealthy man. You've enjoyed incredible success. Just to be able to say, hey, I'm down 20 to 30 million, that's not an easy thing to say, but the lessons that you're able to really appreciate and share that you've taken away from that is what makes you you. And I think that's also why you were such a good and are such a good TV personality, because of this authenticity, how important is that authenticity to you in both the podcast and on television?
I do it for two simple reasons. One, I don't ever want to try to hide behind some facade that I can't remember what I said yesterday. That's the big thing for me. And I used to do that as a kid. I even did it as a young adult. I would create this illusion of achievement, or this illusion of knowledge, or this illusion of some accomplishment that may have been kind of true. And I lived in this world of exaggeration. And the exaggeration was, I think, to make myself feel less insecure, to make myself feel more important than I really was. And that's a hard thing for me to admit. I'd like to admit my losses, and I'm way more comfortable talking about my failures and my losses because I think it gives other people permission. And so often in times in business people think that they have to be greater than, smarter than, better than, richer than. And the absence of those things makes them lesser than. And I watch it a lot with people who go on these speaking tours. And I do a lot of paid engagements, and I'm always nervous when I do them. I actually usually get sick right before because I get nervous. And I usually go on after or before or a part of something where I'm watching people tell people how they can get rich and how they can follow this person's, roadmap to success. And it's just all a bunch of bullshit. It really is, for one simple reason. Each of us are wired differently. We have different mental states. We have different backgrounds. We have different resources, and we handle things differently. And to give somebody a blueprint isn't really true. What you can do, though, is you can give somebody a framework of how they can have permission to think about themselves in good times and in bad times, how they can have permission to realize that if they acknowledge their deficiencies and self-deprecate, it makes their strengths better. And it gets people to ingratiate with them more. Like, I have found that I have much better relationships when I'm just myself. And when I try to front, or I try to be somebody that I'm not, or I try to drive a car because I think somebody's going to be impressed by it, or eat at a restaurant that nobody can get into, I feel like I'm sending the wrong message to people that don't have the ability to do that. I drive a very simple Jeep for one simple reason. I don't love the car, but I love the message that it sends. I don't wear jewelry other than my wedding band. I don't even know if I'd like to wear jewelry, but I don't, because I don't like the message that it sends. There are other things that I do, like wear really outlandish clothes. And I do that partially because I want to give people permission to let themselves breathe. To like wear crazy sneakers with spikes on them. I wear crazy clothes. You don't see me doing that now, but when I go out, I do. And I do it for the same reason that I did the other things, to give people who want to have the freedom to wear whatever they want to wear. They want to wear a pink sweatshirt because that's their thing, do it. They want to wear sneakers with a suit, do it. And I'm using small examples, but the synopsis of all of it is, everything I do is to give other people permission to be something that they want to be that others think they're not supposed to be. Because people used to tell me, you're not supposed to be that way. You're not supposed to say those things. You're not supposed to act that way. And I kept living in this world where I was somebody that I didn't want to be, but I was making everybody else happy. And that ultimately didn't work.
You brought up '09. So a little backstory for me. I was a financial advisor for almost a decade through my 20s. And I actually sold my business in '09, sold my practice. But my first day as an advisor, because essentially as a financial advisor, it's all sales. You're cold calling.
Yep.
My boss stood in front of a room and he had a chalkboard and he drew a line. And he said, on one end of that line is uncomfortable. And on the other end of the line is comfortable. The person who's willing to go to that one end where you're uncomfortable is the guy or girl who's going to make the most money. And he was right, because it's hard picking up the phones. It's hard closing people in the room. It's a hard process. You have to get out of your comfort zone. So I want to know for you, what was one moment throughout your life that you can fondly remember as an incredible learning lesson, but where you had to get out of your comfort zone and now you realize it was truly your greatest learning moment?
I think there's more than one, unfortunately. I think there's more than one, but they're all rooted around the acknowledgement of not knowing the answer. You go into a room and you're going to ask a bank to borrow $100 million. And you go in with a serious amount of trepidation. And I say $100 million to exaggerate the point. It could be $1,000. And you go in with this fear that you're going to look stupid. And you go in with this idea that you're going to have all the answers. And I used to, as I said earlier, and I keep coming back to this, I used to front and make shit up and act like I knew the answer, and I would wing it. And I would think that I was talking myself through the close when I was actually talking myself out of the close, because people would be able to see through it. And for me, that tipping point was going in and saying to a bank, and I remember very specifically, it was in 2001, when I was starting the consolidation that is now known as Camping World. And I said to the bank, look, I don't have a lot of money. I have whatever I got from selling my stock at AutoNation. I don't have a lot of credit. I don't have anybody that can co-sign for me, but I will out hustle and I will outwork everybody and I'll give 150%. And the bank looked at me like, okay, well, that's not really going to be enough. We get a lot of people that want to work hard. And I remember thinking to myself, I have 30 seconds to try to figure out how to make this work. And I ended up not getting the loan because in that moment, I couldn't figure out how to do it. And what I realized when I walked out of that room is that if I was going to try to be somebody I wasn't, I was going to fail 100% of the time. And if I was going to be who I was going to fail 50% of the time. And 50% was better than 100. So I decided just to take off the fake cape, as I like to call it, and the fake superhero costume, and be the guy that shouldn't get the loan, but just was so persistent and so annoying and so, I guess annoying about it that I ended up getting it. And so it was really, again, coming back to that, take your fake cape off, as I like to call it. Take your fake cape off and be yourself.
The profit happens. It's a hit. It turns you into a well-known TV personality. How do you process that? People are now recognizing you on the street. People are probably DMing you on Instagram for loans. How are you able to process that in the moment as it's all happening?
I spend a lot of time thinking about the people that react to it. I do, and I shouldn't even admit that. But I think about, and I don't keep score in my head, but I definitely keep track of it. I think about the gender, I think about the race, and I think about the age. And there'll be days where I feel really accomplished, where I'll get a lot of young people, I'll get a lot of minorities, and on that day, it'll feel like an accomplishment. There'll be days where I'll get a lot of rich bankers and super successful people, and I'll feel like I missed the message, that I failed. And I went to a network that was predominantly a wealthy white man's network. That's what CNBC used to be. I don't believe that it is that today, but I believe that it used to be that. And I'm sure that will get me in trouble. But today it's a more diverse organization, both internally and externally. But I remember thinking to myself that I have to buck the trend here. The other thing that came over me is that I realized the great responsibility that I was given. Not the great privilege or the great honor that I was given, but the great responsibility that it came with, and how my behavior from this day forward would follow me. And if I said the wrong thing, or I did the wrong thing, or I acted the wrong way, or I did something wrong, how that wouldn't just blemish me, it would blemish other people around me, people that were supporters of mine, people that aired the programming, people that advertised on the programming. And it became overwhelming. And I know that sounds like a really bizarre thing to say, but I took that responsibility seriously. Nobody will ever admit this to you. Well, not nobody, but most people won't. I enjoy it. I enjoy the fact that people learn something. I enjoy the fact that people are entertained. And if an entertainer, a singer, a dancer, an actor, a TV personality ever tells you that they don't enjoy the fanfare, they're lying to you. I do enjoy it. And it is a motivator for me when I meet, a retired military guy, or I meet a 17-year-old young lady in school who tells me that it was really good for them or they learned something from it. I'm motivated by it. I also am amused and entertained when people say to me, That was the craziest shit I ever saw. How did you deal with those people? That was bananas. What are those people like? And I do enjoy that. And I think the thing that I also enjoy the most is that if we're filming in a city like New York City, I enjoy the spectacle of it all and the fun that we can have with it. Early on, it was probably more about me than it should have been. And now I love putting these new businesses up on a pedestal and shining the light on them, which is really how the podcast was born, because it was about me focusing on somebody else, not me focusing on what I could do for them, but what they could do for other people.
By the way, how much fun are you having with the podcast? Because here's the difference. With TV, you nailed it. 8 hours, 12 hours, whatever the filming is, they're condensing it down into micro fractions of what really happened. Here, we can just bullshit like dudes and really talk about life. How fun is it to have that filter taken off and be able to just be Marcus Lemonis with a mic in front of him?
Not fun.
Wow.
Scary. Super intimidating, because your ability to compress is not there. 40 hours of footage in 42 minutes, it's still going to be okay. 40-hour interview for a 40-minute interview for a 40-minute show, there's no compression there. And so the vulnerability is super exposed. And it's taken me a while. I've already recorded, like, I think 21. It's taken me a while. I would break into a cold sweat before I started, talking to a business owner that normally I would have no problem with the cameras. It was oddly intimidating. What's been good for me is I've learned more about myself. The podcast has taught me more about myself than probably anything else that I've gotten out of it.
This is so fascinating. You talk about vomiting pretty much before public appearances, cold sweats before jumping on a Zoom. You're worth, listen, I don't know what the number is, but let's call it hundreds of millions. To hear a man talk about that, that's incredible. That's just incredible.
Yeah, what's in somebody's bank account makes their life easier. There's no doubt about it. It gives you the ability to do things that other people cannot. It gives you the ability to provide resources to people when they can't. That's sort of the glamorous part of it. The not so glamorous part of it is that I put my pants on the same way, and I suffer from the same clinical depression that other people that are depressed that don't have as much money have. I suffer from the same eating disorders that other people that have eating disorders have, and money doesn't fix those things. Money doesn't fix insecurity. Money doesn't fix depression. Money doesn't fix social anxiety. Money can, placate certain things. It can medicate certain things if you self-ingratiate yourself, but it doesn't solve things for people. It does solve my ability to eat and have a roof over my head and not worry about my car payment, which is a struggle for a lot of people. And I sympathize with that, I do. But it definitely doesn't fix everything. And I know that's not a boohoo moment. That's just me saying, yeah, I still suffer from terrible depression, and there's no amount of money that can fix that.
Is it an insatiable hunger for you? So business, and I equate this to anybody who's successful as an athlete. There's always this insatiable hunger to, once I've gotten to the top of the mountain, what's the next mountain? Then I'm at the top of that mountain. What's the next mountain? Do you deal with that?
No. When I was a little kid, people would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I used to say, I'm going to be a superhero. And why do you want to be a superhero? And I used to say to people, because I want to protect other kids from the bullshit that I go through. And for me, small business owners are the equivalents of those kids. That for me is the parallel. It's really kind of bizarre, but I look at big kids, Fortune 100 companies, right? Big, smart, tough kids, super athletic kids. That's the Fortune 100 company. Small business owners, limited resources, banks say no all the time, nobody will invest in them, is no different than nobody will pick them for dodgeball. And so for me, if I can use my fake superhero skills, the ones that I made up in my own head that don't actually exist, that I try to manifest myself to give those kids a chance to be on the dodgeball team with the other fake cool kid, that's me, that's what I want to do when I grow up. That's really ultimately how I see this whole thing. I always wanted to be a superhero. I have failed at it. I'm like the generic superhero, like that has like kind of decent superpowers. That's my financial resources. That's my ability to negotiate. That's my ability to know math. That's my ability to problem solve. Those are the things that make me, I think, different than other people. I have these unique blessings and skills, but they get wiped out by all this other crazy shit that makes me not a superhero, right? My cape is kind of torn. My shoes are a little tight. My mask doesn't fit just right. I can't really fly that fast, but I'm still in my own head a superhero. And that to me is how I want to live the rest of my life. I'll just be this like generic, half-ass superhero.
I'm a massive sports fan, and we just had this groundbreaking ruling with NIL where college athletes can now make money off of their names, images, and likenesses. Essentially, you can be an amateur and go make a fantastic living, even millions if you're a star athlete. What are your thoughts, Marcus? Is this a good thing to have these teenagers be able to make this kind of money? Was this long overdue, or are we opening a Pandora's box that could be horrendous?
I think it's a combination of both. I think this idea that commerce has been exploiting young women and men through ad sales and through whatever program it may be, products, whether it's Nike or whatever all the products are. I think that's a problem. I think that's the secondary balance to that is what's the construct that they're going to operate in? And does it take away the purity of being a student athlete? I wish that there was a way where the NCAA and governing bodies of the sorts could figure out a way to allow commerce to be shared, because no one person should make money on the backs of another. Feels like a problem for me. And we don't want there to be contamination of the mind. And at 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, whatever the amateur ages are, we're all still pretty ripe. Our minds are still sponges. We're very impressionable. We can be taken down a very dark path by other very dark people. And I don't know where the regulatory body is. I'm sure that the big agencies of sorts, the CAAs of the world, love this because it allows their client roster to expand. I'm sure that the families love it because money that they were potentially getting is now above board as opposed to below board. It reminds me a little bit of prohibition. People were drinking. They just were drinking and getting the alcohol in a way that wasn't kosher. There were people receiving funds, no matter what you're going to tell me, because I saw it as a student athlete. There are people receiving funds, not to the degree and not to the amount, but in a way that created, it made money dirty. And I think anytime you can make money dirty and evil or demonize it, it's a problem. A lot of times I get in arguments with people that, in fact, there was a network executive that I was talking to a couple of months ago that said to me, well, that person's an immigrant and you're a billionaire. I said, well, first of all, you confused my origin from my financial status. Those are not analogous. That's like saying to these kids, you're from the hood and you don't deserve this. You're white and you're a tennis player and you don't deserve this. If the free market is going to allow commerce to exist, then that should be the case. But where's the regulatory body that will ensure that there's education, resources, training, discipline, financial advising to ensure these kids don't get taken advantage of twice?
That's such an eloquent answer, because on Twitter, someone had the simplest of tweets. They go, who's going to tell these kids they have to pay taxes on this money? And I read that and I'm like, that's so simple, but so true. When you're giving an 18-year-old who may have never had any backing or any teaching, all of a sudden here's $500,000 because you're sponsored by Nike and you're not properly prepared, it could all go to shit.
I think if the Nikes of the world are smart, they will spend a significant amount of money building a financial learning infrastructure for student athletes. One, to create a stickiness between them and the brand, right? 2, to convince the parents that this is a long-term strategy, not a short-term strategy. And 3, if we are going to provide financial resources to people that aren't normally used to it, 18, 17-year-olds aren't used to getting $100,000 checks, the most important thing we can do is to provide the infrastructure. I want to segue to something that I think will draw a parallel. Many years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, my phone rang. I was doing a photo shoot for the History Channel. And on the other end of the line, the person answered and said, "Is this Marcus?" "Yes, sir, it is." "Hi, this is Jamie." I said, "Okay, how are you? What can I do for you?" And you could find my phone number on the internet. You could just type my first name, my last name, cell phone number, and my phone number comes up. That's how this person found it, I thought. He said, "I want to tell you that I really enjoy your program, and it's done a lot for me. I use it with my management team. My kids and I watch it together. Thank you very much, sir. Is there anything I could do for you?" "Yes, I'd like to know if I can meet with you." So, geez, I'm really busy. It's like a cold call that I probably shouldn't have answered. "I'm really busy, but I would be glad to share my email. And if you ever need something specific and I can be helpful, no problem." He said, "Listen, I really would like you to meet with me." I said, "Sir, I'm really sorry." He says, I'm a little confused why you won't meet with me." "Sir, I'm sorry. I'm getting frustrated." He said, "I'm the chairman of one of the world's largest banks. I'm kind of like a big deal." And I said, who is this?" He said, "It's Jamie Dimon." And I said, "Stop fucking around. Who is this?" He said, "Marcus, it's Jamie Dimon. Would you like me to tell you what kind of money we lend you?" And I said, "No, sir." I said, "How did you get my phone number?" And he said, "I got it from the chairman of NBC Universal. I'm on the board there. He's on my board," or one of those things. "And I just wanted to call and see if there's a chance that you and I can meet." "Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir." Right? Of course. Jamie Dimon calls you. I don't care how much money you have. That's a big deal, right? So I go to his office, and I'm super nervous. I'm like figuring out, what am I going to wear? What do my shoes look like? Do I wear a tie? Do I wear a sport coat? By the way, I have money. It's not like I'm interviewing for a job or a loan, but this is like a big deal. I get to his office. We're sitting in his little area, and he says to me, "You know what I love about you?" I said, "Yes, sir. What is that?" "Yes, sir." He said that you're more concerned about how people are going to pay back the loan than how they're going to get the loan. All my bankers here want to give out money to people. They want to make themselves feel better by giving out grants, because we're giving money to people, but we don't tell them what to do with it. And we're lending people money, and we don't tell them how to pay it back." He goes, "You got to promise me something. You and I have to figure out how to get people to understand that receiving a grant, receiving an investment, receiving a loan is the easy part. The hard part is, what do I do with the money? How do I pay it back? And how do I give my investor a return on their capital?" And he said, "That's all I want to talk about. I have nothing else to say. Please just keep that in your mind." And that has stuck with me. And I think that's, as we close things up, in our conversation today, I think that's the thing that we should all be thinking about. Giving people an opportunity is one thing. Giving them the roadmap of what we want them to do with that opportunity is the more important thing.
And that leads me to my final question. And one of the main reasons that I started this show was to talk to successful people like you about the principles that help make them successful. So my question to you, Marcus Lemonis, what do you do in your life to continue to elevate?
Elevate myself.
Elevate yourself.
My younger self answer would have been to do more, to buy more, to have more, to see more, to spend more. That would have been my younger self answer. My answer now is to give away as much money as I possibly can, because I don't have kids. I have literally, I'm married, recently married 3 years ago. I have no kids. My mom is dead. My dad is older. I have no idea what I'm going to do with my money when I'm done. I have 36 million shares of my business. And so the way that I elevate myself is by ending my career, ending my life, trying to figure out what my legacy is going to be. And I want my legacy to be, that dude gave me 10 grand when nobody else would. That guy helped me do something when nobody else would. That guy paid for something that I couldn't get somewhere else. That person kicked my ass when I had a bad attitude about something. That's it. That's how I'll elevate myself. I started with consumption, and I've turned the spigot the other way and wanting to figure out how to elevate myself by giving more. And that's why the 100% podcast got created, because it's about profiling people who would not normally get profiled, giving them a chance to earn something, get something, receive something, be rewarded with something that they otherwise would not, and having a famous celebrity validate their work. And while we say that that's not important, people love validation. I love it. Being on your podcast is validation for me. Them being on my podcast, hopefully, is validation for them. We all need validation. Let's elevate people by validating.
Marcus, this was amazing. Thank you for an incredible 45 minutes. You are eloquent, philosophical, and I love the shit that comes out of you, man. I
apologize for my cussing, but don't edit it out.
No, I curse constantly. I love it. So I love that type of banner, especially coming from a billionaire. You can't beat it. Congratulations on the new podcast, the new show. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, man.